Hello, everyone, and welcome to this pre-recorded bidders conference. I am Savannah Hunt. I work for the Utah State Board of Education. I am the 21st Century Community Learning Center's grant specialist. So I am in charge of running this grant competition, coordinating with the grant scorers and awarding the funds. So today in this video, we're going to go over the new application. It is a slightly different process this year than previous years that I really hope will be easier for applicants, as well as easier for the scorers, easier for them to get you effective feedback and comments, and easier for me to put together as well. I'm hoping this will be easier for all of us. So we're not using anything in Qualtrics this year. Everything will be uploaded directly into your application in Utah Grants. If you have not already watched the 21st Century Grant Information video, then I would suggest you start there. In this video, we are just going over the application and the process and filling that out. We're not going over all of the grant information, the grant requirements, and all of those things that is in that video. Two separate ones. So you can watch the grant information video, really get an idea for what the purpose of 21st Century programming is, what the requirements of this grant are, so that you can decide if you think you can fulfill them before having to go through and watch this video and apply. So we will jump right in. This is the grant application. I have it open in a Word document, which is how it will open for you. I think it technically will open as a Google document, but you can obviously download it as a Word document. This is how you will complete your application directly in the document and then upload this to Utah Grants. So no more having to prep in one document and then copy and paste into Qualtrics or some other format. You're going to download this document, fill out your responses in this document, upload this document. So I'm hoping it'll be easy. This first page has some basic instructions. All of the information about the competition this year is on the 21st Century website at USBE, this link down at the bottom of this page. Hopefully you've already been to that website, because that website was how you downloaded the document, but just in case, there it is. All of the videos, all of the necessary materials, all of the links, everything should be on that website. You shouldn't need information from any other sources, except Utah Grants, but there is a link to Utah Grants on that website. So the letter of intent is due by April 1st. If you do not submit a letter of intent, then you will be ineligible to apply. So please make sure you get those filled out. It's literally just the name of your organization, your name, and like how many programs you're going to apply for. And that's it. It's a 1-minute long form. Like I said, you'll fill out all of your competitive points and narrative questions directly in this document. You will still create a separate document for your site program information, and we'll get into a bit more detail on that later in the video. And then the gap analysis template that has been required in past years, you'll still need to do that. So those two documents will also need to be uploaded. Any other principal letters, any other relevant documentation, anything for the competitive priority points, that all will just be uploaded straight into Utah Grants. And then you'll need to fill out your budget and budget narrative directly in Utah Grants. The Utah Grants application is not open as of recording this in early February. The Utah Grants application will probably not open until late April, early May. I'm hoping for May 1st, so that then you'll have a whole month to upload everything. And they're all due May 27th by the end of the day. And then we will score them all and get award notices out in July. This language, I don't know if it's in here, but it is in the grant information in the program assurances. A quick reminder that 21st century funds are always dependent on USBE having received them from the federal government. Last year, we received them a couple weeks late. We all were kind of sitting in limbo, wondering, waiting if our funds are going to come. As of recording this video, the budget is not approved yet. The budget does have 21st century fully funded, but it is not approved. So they're still figuring that out. So this is the beginning of the parts you'll actually fill out. Your organization name, list up to 6 sites that you can apply for. So you can have 1 all the way up to 6. Then if you're going to do school year, summer, both, the annual amount that you are requesting, so you can request up to $400,000. That information and stipulations are once again in the grant information guide, not in here. I kind of separated them out into 2 different documents this year. So the grant information guide has all of the relevant context and information to read through. And then this document, the application, has all the stuff for you to fill out. So up to $400,000 a year, at least $100,000 a year. And then the total amount you're requesting. So if you're requesting $400,000 annually times 4, that would be $1,600,000. This is a 4-year grant. In the past, it has been 5 years. This will be 4 years, not 5. It will be fully funded for all 4 years. There's no more drop off. That's part of why it's 4 instead of 5, in order to pay for not cutting people down to 75%. We had to save some money by not going up to 5 years. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there. And then your main contacts, up to 5 people, and you'll fill them out in here. And think for a minute if you want to add a business administrator or fiscal administrator as one of those 5 contacts. I occasionally run into situations where a business administrator or fiscal person, whoever's actually putting it in Utah grants, your reimbursements and things, they're not always getting the relevant information from me because I'm emailing whoever is listed as a contact in this application. Or if you email me and ask me later, hey, will you add this person? I'm happy to do that. But if you haven't given me your business administrator's contact info, then I'm not emailing them. And they might not have it. So if you don't want to list them, they don't want to get my newsletter every single month, then it is up to whoever's listed here to make sure that everyone on your team has the relevant information that they need. That also includes your site coordinators. If you probably can't list every single site coordinator as a contact, depending on how many programs you have. So it is up to the people listed as a contact, your grant administrator, to make sure that everyone on the team has everything they need. So think really hard about who you want to be here, who has the time and bandwidth to communicate with other members of your team and make sure they have all the relevant information. Okay, program site information. This has not had any huge changes. We are going back to requiring that everyone has a 40% or more poverty rate. There was 1 year we didn't do that. We're going back to having that. Everyone must operate 10 hours a week, 32 weeks a year. Asking about healthy snack. So this information you will upload in a separate document. I don't have any sort of specific template for that. You can format it however you want, as long as it has all of the relevant information and will be accessible. So this you'll create and upload into Utah Grants. Then we have our private school consultation. You'll notice all of the questions have been changed from character limits to word limits. That is to help accommodate that hopefully this will allow for a lot of different formatting on your end if you would like. and we didn't want character limits to make that harder. So private school consultation, you must consult with private schools that are within the geographical area that you're serving, to make sure you've figured out what their priorities are. Do they have any need for after school? Are there ways you can collaborate? And all of those things. So it does list out what your consultation needs to include. And then you can fill out this part. So you'll fill it out directly in the document. So for all these narrative questions, you'll have, a question or something, and then it should say, put your response right here. So you'll just type it in this document right here. So the formatting of your document is going to get a little off, but we're going to live with that. Because I think it's hopefully going to be easier for everyone. So even though like you have a whole page here, you don't need to worry about the spacing here or anything, as long as it's in that 600 word limit. Your local education agency planning, once again, 600 word limit, and then you can put your response here. So if it bleeds onto the next page, like it's totally fine. I do hope you can make it clear. This is our response to this question. Here's where the next part starts. And hopefully it doesn't get too messy. Okay. So absolute priority, this is like I was saying, we're going back to needing at least 40%. And most people are using a free and reduced price lunch rate. If you have some other sort of evidence or data to measure that, you can feel free to ask about that. But I am going on maternity leave in February and will not be back till April 15th. So if you have questions for me that you feel like only I can answer, you got to wait till after April 15th, and I will hopefully answer them as soon as possible, and you can have the rest of May to figure it out. But so you'll need to acknowledge if they are at least 40%. Competitive priorities, we have not had major changes here from previous years. So once again, you'll write out any sort of responses, yes, no, listing sites here in the document. And then if there are any questions where there is requested other documentation, such as here, program includes a supervisory role for at least one licensed teacher, and documentation is required there. So you'll just upload that separate documentation into Utah Grants. And then here in these boxes is where you can list out all of the sites that meet this qualification. So here in competitive points 2, every site you're applying for should be listed in each of these boxes because they all need to apply. And here you can provide the explanation here in this box. Competitive points 3, so just one or more of your proposed program sites need to meet this. So once again, you'll just write out the sites here in the box. And then for the documentation, you'll upload it. I didn't upload, it did update the page numbers here, but the proposed rural county map and list are at the end of this document, as they always have been. Narrative questions. So we're getting into some changes here. We used to have 13 narrative questions. There are now only 9. I tried to make this year's application a bit easier to fill out, a bit shorter, a bit less complicated. We'll see if that was successful or not. But you'll type your responses directly in here. Please just put everything in 12-point font. And then you can see here, Qualtrics just let you type out one big long mass of words that was difficult to read and difficult to follow. Now that we're doing it in Word, you can feel free to make bulleted lists of things, add subheadings, maybe put certain things in bold or color code, however you need, however you think will make it more effective for people to understand what you're saying, understand the connections you're making. Have at it. Do whatever you need to do to get your points across effectively in a way that's easily comprehensible for all of the grant readers. So the needs assessment is the very first thing. Obviously, we want to fund programs that need after school, that need the purposes of 21st century. 21st century programming is designed for students to get academic support through tutoring and homework help, through other enrichment activities like arts, recreation, cooking, STEM, music, and through family and community engagement and education, providing the families of students with actual services and with education, helping them be involved in the program and help get them involved in their students' education. So, what are the needs of the community, and how does 21st century purposes meet those needs? That's really the main question that we should be keeping in mind throughout the entire application. So you want to describe factors that place students and families at risk of educational failure. Include description of your process for gathering that data, who was involved in that process, where does this data come from. We want to include an inventory of existing community resources, even if they only partially meet the needs, and to demonstrate that the proposed out-of-school time program activities are, as a date of submission, not accessible to students who would be served or would expand high quality services. So I know that's really wordy. Some of the end of this language does come directly from the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The Every Student Succeeds Act is what it's called now. So we want to figure out the needs, describe how you figured out the needs, where that all came from. And then we also want to look at an inventory of the community. So what already exists that might partially meet the need? I see a lot of applications come through where people have just kind of written out, there are no other after-school programs in our area. And sometimes I know that there are other after-school programs in your area. Sometimes there are other 21st century programs. But even if there are not other 21st century programs in your area or other after-school programs, well, what is in your area? Are there private child care centers? Are there city recreation sports leagues that meet some of these needs? Are there private tutoring centers? Does the school district offer any tutoring? There might be different organizations and community partners that are meeting some of the needs you're discussing, but they're not meeting all of the needs that you plan or propose to meet. For example, if there's a private child care center, you might be able to say, we're going to serve more students. Obviously, 21st century programs, we cannot charge program fees. That is in the grant information guide. So please, once again, read that. We cannot charge any program fees. So you might be able to say, here's a list of all of these different organizations that meet the community needs, but they all cost money. We're proposing a program that would not cost anything, so therefore we're going to be able to meet more needs. We're going to make them more accessible than they were before. That's really what we're looking for in the inventory, as well as the description of how you conducted the inventory. Did you sit down on Google? Did you meet with community partners? What's going on? The rubrics here, you'll see all narrative questions will be scored out of 10 points, but they will be weighted differently in the scoring. So the weight of the questions will be very similar to before, but simply to make it easier for grant readers mostly, they're all out of 10 points, just 1 to 10. And then when we do the math at the end, they'll be weighted differently. So like previous years, the needs assessment, the project design, the budget will be some of those larger weighted items. So in the rubric, a 10 out of 10 is considered a perfect answer. We cannot imagine a better answer. It meets every single piece of this. It is an exquisite answer that you are proposing. A 4 to 7 meets expectations. This is an average answer. It's pretty good. There's some detail here. Maybe it's missing just a little bit. Maybe some of it's kind of just generalized. So a 4 out of 10 is a good answer. An 8 out of 10 is a great answer. And you'll also notice there's ranges even within the rubric. So within this top part, it's not just 10 out of 10. There's 8 out of 10 and 9 out of 10. So you can meet every single one of these criteria, maybe barely, and get an 8 out of 10. Or you could meet every single one of these criteria in the most perfect possible way imaginable and get a 10 out of 10. That is how all of these rubrics are going to be used. That is how the grant readers are going to be trained to use them. So that is what you should expect. You should not be anticipating or expecting to be always getting 10 out of 10 on all your answers. Once again, not once again, but some of the narrative questions have application guidance. These are suggestions. These are additional context. The application guidance is not part of the rubric. It is not going to be taken into account in scoring. It is just some ideas or context. And then you'll fill out that needs assessment here under the response. So the response where you'll put your answer should usually be under the guidance or right under the rubric. And then the word limit will be up here next to the title of the question. So it is a 1,500 word limit. It's one of the larger ones. That gets you a couple of pages, theoretically. So then we move to the project design. This has no limit, and you'll see why in a moment. This is where we've had the most amount of change in the application. The project design has been completely redesigned. So instead of filling out a description of your program, that a lot of it seemed redundant. There were other questions later on that were asking about a lot of the same things that were in the project design. So some things have been removed to help reduce redundancy. The project design now, instead of writing out a whole description, you're going to complete a logic model table. And that will be right down here. So this logic model is designed to be a brief overview of your project design as a whole. There may be questions later on in the application where they're asking about something you did mention in the project design, but because this is designed to be a brief overview, that question still remains so that you can provide more details there. The project design should be, like I said earlier, really a description of how the needs of your community are going to be met through the purposes of the 21st Century Grant. That's really the question we're answering here. So you can take each of the needs you've discussed in your needs assessment above and list them out here. You can add as many rows as you need. I just threw in 4 to get you started. If you've got 12 different needs, whatever it is, add as many rows as you need to. You usually can do that through hovering over here, and there's a little plus button. So you'll list out the need here from your assessment. And then we've got a couple other boxes. So the first one is staff inputs and other resources. So this is where you might list out a community partner, some other sort of funding resource, and then other staff actions. So what are the staff inputting into the program? So an example I listed is, maybe students need to improve their math scores is a need you've seen in your community. So the staff input first is that they're going to research some different math activities, curriculum, and how they can better align themselves with math teachers in the school day. Whether you're an LEA applying or a community-based organization, we always want great school day alignment. So those are the first staff inputs, those kind of first actions being taken. Then we're going to move to staff outputs. So I kind of think of staff inputs as things that are going on maybe in the background during prep time, not necessarily with students, it could be. And then staff outputs are probably things that are happening more during program with students. So the staff outputs are the result of staff inputs. So maybe you have researched different math activities, different math curriculum, and then your objective here is that staff will conduct a certain number of hours of math homework help with students. So maybe every week we're going to do 3 hours of specific math homework help or a specific math curriculum, or we're incorporating math into more enrichment activities this many times each week or each month or during the year, whatever it is. And this is just an example. They don't have to look exactly like this. So these staff outputs, once again, are things that staff are doing. This is not where we're going to put, we want students to improve their math. That goes over here in student outcomes. So we've got our staff outputs and our student outcomes. This is maybe where I would start, unless you wanted to start with the needs. So you have a need. Well, what do we consider that need being met? Well, if we had 70% of our students improving their RISE math scores, or 70% of students meeting benchmark, or we want 70% of students participating in math activities during after school. It can be a broad range of things. But some of you may have heard me say before in previous years during orientation or different presentations I've given, a lot of us set goals around student outcomes, and then we're really disappointed when we don't meet them because we can't control what outcomes are for students. You can have the best math curriculum, you can have the best staff doing the highest quality activities, but you're not controlling every single influence on your students. And so you, as a program, cannot actually control if 70% of your students improve their RISE math scores. But what you can control is your staff outputs and your staff inputs. You are 100% in control of your staff outputs and what is happening here. So that's why we kind of have this logic model broken down so that you can think about what is the need. Well, our need is that students need to improve their math. So what's the student outcome we want for that will show us that we've met the need? And then what do we need to do to get here? So that later, a year or two down the road, when we're talking about your goals and objectives, You might feel a little disappointed if you don't meet your goal, but maybe we can celebrate that you did meet your staff outputs. This is what you actually can control. And then you can reevaluate. Well, maybe our staff outputs are not having the impact we think they actually are having on our student outcomes. And next year or 2 years from now, you make some revisions to this logic model. And then the last piece of the logic model is listing one or more grant purposes that you're going to use to address this. So you might put all three, you might just put one, you might put two, whatever you want. So for math, we're talking about student activities. Maybe we'll put academics and tutoring and additional broad enrichment activities. You could put family education. You could say, hey, as part of our need for improved math scores, and you could list a need multiple times. If you say, hey, our student needs to improve their math scores, we're actually going to list it 3 or 4 times in here because we're going to use this new curriculum and we're going to improve our alignment with school day teachers. We're going to meet with teachers X amount of times during the school year. And we're going to hold 2 family enrichment nights that are focused on math, that are focused on the core standards and how parents and families can get involved in math education. So you could put them on separate lines if that's helpful for you. So what is the purpose of this grant? Not just any grant. What is the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant purpose that is going to help you meet those needs? So this is for all 5 years, or all 4 years. It's still used to being 5. This is for all 4 years. What are you going to be doing over the course of 4 years? This can be changed. If you are awarded and this is your logic model, I expect next year you're going to do a program evaluation and evaluate this logic model and see if any changes need to be made. So this is not written in stone. I always say 4 years is a long time. Needs change, resources change, processes change, and that's okay. But this is kind of the start. So you can see why this is brief. This is not going to get every single detail out about your whole program. This is really an overview for yourselves, for me, for the grant readers, to understand the basic components of your program and the steps you're going to take to meet the needs. I know this is new. This is not something we've really used super consistently before. Some of you are familiar with logic models, having participated in some of the capacity building with UEPC a couple years ago. Hopefully the descriptions and examples that I've given here are helpful enough for you to be able to fill it out. And then the rubric for that logic model is up here by the question. So like always, we list the question, we list the rubric, then there's application guidance, and then your response. So we want it to be clear that it is appropriate for your targeted needs, that it's aligned with your needs assessment, that the goals and objectives and outcomes are specific and clearly measurable. I'm not making you fill out a bunch of SMART goals, but we should be thinking about SMART goals in mind. So like this 70% of students will improve their RISE scores. That is measurable. Staff will conduct a certain number of homework hours. And I'm putting certain number as an example. You should be putting a number here. Staff will be doing 80 hours of homework help. That's measurable. We can know if we did that. Staff research math activities and curriculum. We can measure that. Did you do that? Yes or no? And we can put a timeline on those things if we would like to. All of this should be clearly measurable. And And then goals, objectives, and outcomes are discussed in relation to appropriate 21st century purposes. So we're thinking through, how does 21st century programming meet the needs? Not just money. We're not just giving away free money. We are creating 21st century programs. Okay, so we'll move to principles of effectiveness. There have not been a lot of changes here. These principles of effectiveness come straight from the Every Student Succeeds Act. These are not something I created. These are mostly around your program activities and how they relate specifically to high quality academic standards. So this is really where we should be talking about how we are evaluating our activities. Are they evidence-based? Are we using evidence-based curriculum? And how do they tie to the Utah State Core Standards? There is a link to the Utah State Core Standards in the information guide packet. So this is once again where we're seeing there might be a little bit of redundancy, but hopefully not too much. That we're going to talk a little bit about improving math, for example, here, but then we're really going to deep dive here in principles of effectiveness. Well, how did we research our math curriculum and how is it tied to core standards? What is our process like for looking at core standards? Is everyone reading the core standards? Who's making the curriculum? Who is reviewing the curriculum? Is it only the grant admin and leadership? Are site coordinators reviewing the curriculum? Are our, kind of frontline educators, youth development professionals, whatever you call them at your organization, are they the ones deciding what the curriculum is? Who's actually doing it? So this is where we get a deep dive of something that might have been referenced in the logic model. And you want to make sure you're addressing every point in here. Annual program evaluation, reporting, and continuous improvement. I took 3 different narrative questions and kind of merged them into one question that is hopefully more simple. If you go read the information guide and or watch the information guide video, you can get descriptions of each of the reports here. We have the annual program evaluation and application updates. This is new. It is an amalgamation of the current continuation application that's usually due in like fall, winter time. And then the program evaluation, which current grantees have only been doing in year 3, it now will be every year. Every year you will turn in an evaluation to me, but I'm going to provide a template. I'm going to provide a list of, here are the suggested things, and it will be hopefully a little smaller and shorter than a big 3-year evaluation. The evaluation will be based on your logic model. An evaluation, like always, is answering the question, did we set out to do what we wanted to do? So if we wanted to improve student rise scores by 70%, did we do that? Yes or no? Did we do our objectives? How did it actually go? And then do we need to make any changes to our logic model for the next year? And then some application updates. It'll be kind of like a very brief, very pared down continuation application. It will mostly just be asking some general questions like, how many students do you have enrolled right now? Are you running program right now? Occasionally we see programs that, for whatever reason, hiring or recruitment, take a couple months to start running. So are you running? What does your ADA look like? What are your staff to student ratios like? Then we will move to the federal 21 APR. So once again, all the information is on the USBE website about 21 APR. It is a large report. It is detailed. It requires tracking data from the very beginning of the school year, really from the summer. That is something you want to be familiar with if you are applying for this grant. So please go view the information guidance. Go to the 21st Century USBE website and review the data guides there for 21 APR so that you know exactly what the categories are and everything. It can be a lot if you aren't doing it consistently. If you get a good system in place, it sometimes isn't as hard. But if you don't have a good system, it can feel like a lot, especially as a first year grantee. So please go familiarize yourself with that. We historically have reported that in the fall and winter. The timeline on that will be much more broad in starting this year and into the next years, I'm hoping. So I'm hoping to have the forms ready to fill out by June. We've always had this kind of delay based on the federal reporting window, but now that everyone's reporting it to me through Qualtrics, I can open it whenever I want. So I'm going to open it in June. Window 1 for 21 APR will probably continue to close in like October, so that I have time to put it all in by November. But if you would like to fill it out sooner and fill it out in June or July, it'll be open. You'll have a whole, what is that, 4 or 5 months to fill that out. And then window 2 will be a little bit later. It probably will still be open in the summer. I know a lot of mostly the state assessment scores will not be ready in the summer, but I'll at least have it open so that if you would like to fill out some of the other data earlier, you can, and then fill out the state assessment scores and things a little later. So this timeline really it's almost the whole year. It's June to January really is when that will be available most likely. The quality tools normally do in the fall, and that is through the Utah After School Network. You can find the link to that on the guidance information guide. And then the program information form is due every spring. That is also through the Utah After School Network, and you can find the link to that in the guide. So the main questions here are, what is your process for getting all of this stuff done? It's 4 big reports. Who's involved? Who is doing this? When are they doing it? How are they doing it? Do we take attendance on paper? Do we take attendance on a software? Do we have our site coordinators filling all of these things out? Is there some sort of other separate data person? Are we going to hire an external evaluator every year? That will still be an option that you're welcome to take if you would like to. Are we going to have the site coordinators collecting most of this data and then have some sort of administrator actually fill them out? What is the process going to look like here? How are we going to get it done? What does the timeline look like? That's the first question we're really answering. And then the second one, describe how you're going to utilize all of this to inform any future changes or improvements to your project design logic model. So every summer, really whenever you're working on your evaluation, you will hopefully take some time to use all of these 4 reports give you a robust amount of data about your program. So how are you going to use all of these reports that I don't want to give you busy work. I require these 4 reports because I believe that they can help improve your program, that they are valuable to you. So how are you going to use these reports to improve your program, to make the necessary or relevant improvements? So this is where it will tie back to the logic model you filled out. That, you fill it out right now, and then come a year from now, probably a year and a half from now, after you've done all these reports, how are you going to use those to make any relevant changes? Okay. And then having, a really detailed, clear plan. We don't want it to just be vague, like we're going to look at them and see if it works. We want to know who's going to do it. When are you going to review all of these reports? Are you going to use some sort of strengths and weaknesses model? Are you going to create your own separate logic model? Are you averaging? Are you going to have things be the same for all of your sites? Which that is something I forgot to say about the logic model, but it is in writing up here. That this logic model is for your entire grant application cohort. I don't want to say it's for your whole organization because some of you have sites in other cohorts, but this is for your whole cohort. So you don't necessarily need to make separate lines for every single site. You can, if you would like to, because it's very possible that you have some sites that have needs that other sites don't have. It's possible your sites have similar needs. So this is really for your whole cohort. So just individualize it as you need to. Like I said, if you have one site that has this really specific need, even though none of your other sites have it, feel free to list it out here. Or some of your needs might be for all of the sites. Okay, community and family education. This has not had major changes from previous years. It was mostly me going in and adding that this is really the whole community, not just families. So this is where we're really diving into that third purpose. We want to make sure that we are providing opportunities to educate the family members and community members of the students in your program. And then how are you getting community and family members involved in the academics, in really just your programming as a whole? How are they being made partners in decision making? And then how is information about your program being disseminated and spread out to the community? So this could involve some recruitment, information about resources and engagement activities. How are you actually getting that out to the community? Travel and safety. We have not had any huge changes here from previous years. I did take out the part about the emergency preparedness procedures. So it's a bit more broad. If you want to know about check-in, check-out procedures, general safety, how are you creating a program that is safe and accessible for students? That's obviously a number one priority in terms of programming. Yes, we want programming that is educational. Yes, we want programming that helps kids build leadership skills. But the number one thing we want is that programming is safe. So how are you making sure your staff are safe? How are you making sure that they are safe individuals for children to be around, that they are well trained, that the physical environment, the emotional environment are all safe and accessible to students? So we want really detailed plans, not just general vague plans. And then the check-in, check-out procedures are for safety, but they are also for some of your data. 21 APR requires that we report student attendance in hours. So we can't just check this kid's here and then not do anything else. We need to know this kid got here at 3:30 and they left at 4:15. Another student got here at 3:30 and they left at 5:30 when program got over, or whatever it is. So we do need very detailed check-in, check-out procedures for safety and for our data. Professional development and recruitment. So describing your plan for your first year. Maybe you have a brand new program, or you might have a lot of brand new staff in that first year especially. So what does training look like for that? And then how is that going to continue into years 2 through 4? Your training might look a little different in years 2 through 4 if you're a brand new program. And then also a detailed plan for your recruitment and retention of staff, including volunteers. We don't see as many volunteers in our programs as I would hope, as I would like. So how are we recruiting volunteers? How are we making the most of that service as a resource to our programs and our communities? Then sustainability. So this question's a little bit different because we no longer have that drop off in funds in years 4 and 5. So you're going to get the same amount of annual funding for all 4 years. So we've removed the part of the question about continuation in years 4 and 5. And this is really looking at how are you continuing your program after this grant ends. You're going to get money for 4 years and then it's going to be gone unless you are able to reapply and explain that the needs are still there and be refunded. Um, so how are you going to do that? I know that it's hard. I am not under any guise that this is easy, that there is just money free flowing from all sorts of different places. I'm not expecting a perfect plan that you're going to be able to execute flawlessly because there's so many different organizations giving out money and fundraisers are easy and donors are easy to find. But we do want you to at least show that you have thought it through, that you're at least going to try. I sometimes have heard from grantees who have no plan and they've basically given up. That's not what we want to see. I want to see grantees who are committed to at least trying. Can we make a plan? Can we look at what the options might be to apply for, even if we don't get awarded? What are we at least going to try to do to sustain our program for the needs of our community? How are we using federal, state, local, private grants? What fundraising opportunities can we do? Who else can we partner with to reduce costs? What are we at least going to try, even if it might not be successful? Then we get to the budget and gap analysis. So the gap analysis is linked right down here. So you'll fill out this template. So the gap analysis will ask you to describe your finances this current year, and then what your finances are looking like for next year so that you can show that there's a financial need for this grant along with the needs assessment, that there's a gap there. There's a gap in what we need to meet our goals. And then the budget. So the budget you're not going to complete in this document. You're going to fill out the itemized budget in Utah Grants. So the link is on the USBE website and in the information guidance document to be able to fill that out. And then underneath the itemized lines, you'll fill out your narrative. So the narrative needs to explain the proposed expenditures and how each expenditure aligns with the needs and logic model in an efficient and effective manner for each program site. So we want funds to be used efficiently. We know these are our tax dollars. These are your tax dollars, my tax dollars at work. And we know there's a lot of talk right now about wasting tax dollars. We don't want to waste them. We want to use them effectively. That's not to say that you need to propose the absolute cheapest program possible. You can ask for more money if you think there's good reason for more money. If we want to pay our staff a couple extra dollars more an hour because we're struggling to retain them and we think that will be helpful. Or we really want a dedicated family and community engagement specialist, that is their entire job, that's their whole focus is to do this. So we need to add an extra position that costs more money. There are reasons that we might spend more money because more money gets us frequently higher quality, and it's a balance. Um, it's a balance, figuring out quality and efficiency. So there should be an explanation included of how the stated costs reflect careful planning for your estimated number of people that you'll be serving and the ratios that are going to go along with that. Are you going to have a 20-to-1 staff to student ratio or 15-to-1 or 10-to-1? Things like that. How many students are you actually serving? What kind of space do you need? How many supplies do you need? How many staff do you need to serve that many students? We want to see in the narrative that there's reason for each of these things, that there's logical planning behind it. This rubric used to be very much just, did you complete all the documents? If you completed everything in the budget and budget narrative and gap analysis, you probably scored a 20 out of 20 here. I've redone the rubric a little bit so that it does reflect more of that effective and efficient manner, showing the careful planning. We want to see that you've really thought it through, not just picking things because they seem good. So you'll fill this out in Utah Grants. This you'll download. You'll click right here and download it, fill it out, and you'll upload it into Utah Grants along with this document. And then we get to school principal letters. So we want to see commitment and support, and we want to see an indication that they have reviewed the Align for Success rubric. You can find the link to the Align for Success rubric on the USBE website and in the information guidance document. It's on there. This comes from the Utah After School Network. I talk with a lot of school officials, district officials, who, whether or not the after school program comes through the LEA or is from a community-based organization, I see a lot of school principals who go, yeah, I'm super excited about the after school program, love the after school program, and that's it. They verbally express some support, say, hey, you can use the cafeteria, and that's it. And there's really no other conversation, no other collaboration, because they don't know what it looks like to really collaborate well. So that is why it does need to include an indication that they've reviewed the rubric. Not that they've completed it, but that they've read it. They know what it looks like to align and coordinate well with an out-of-school time program, whether that's after school or before school or summertime. They should be coordinating. And then we've added optional superintendent letters. So whether you're an LEA or you are a community-based organization, you can get both of these things. We run into situations sometimes where the principals are super gung-ho, maybe the grant administrators are super gung-ho and excited about the after-school program, but then the superintendent or equivalent has like no idea and is not excited about it. And as things move around, as there's turnover, as this school got a new principal, and all of a sudden they don't want an after school program anymore. And then you're calling me asking if you can move your program to another site, which we can discuss and is allowable, but we want to avoid that. We want to avoid a situation where just a simple change in principal all of a sudden means this after school program goes away. So that is why it's optional. Some extra points if you can get superintendent also to provide a letter that also should indicate that they have reviewed the Align for Success rubric. And then this all is just more reference information about the rural, the priority points for being a rural program. I know some of you may feel if you're in a more urban area that is not fair to provide competitive points for rural programs, but we all have different needs, and it's also a federal requirement. So if schools are on this list, then they would qualify as rural for that competitive priority points. So that is the whole application. You have until May 27th to fill this out and upload it. Everything you will need to do it will be on the 21st Century website. I am making sure of that all the relevant information is there. And then they will be scored and award notices will go out in July. So please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I unfortunately will be on maternity leave from mid-February till mid-April. So if you have a question, you can try and get it to me before I leave, or if not, I will try and catch it when I come back in April. But hopefully there's enough information on the website for you to be able to complete the application as you need. And I hope you all have an excellent day.